Hey guys, welcome back to another Default Cube CG Matter tutorial, and today I wanted to talk about the SynthEyes to Blender workflow, and that is for no particular reason. I've just been using SynthEyes recently, and I just want to talk about it. By the way, I graduated recently, so hooray for me, more tutorials coming soon, but whatever. Basically, what we want to do is have some footage here. I filmed the bathroom. I waited for like the 10-second gap where nobody was in there so I could film the urinals, and I was a bit scared of what might happen if somebody was to just walk in, but that did not happen. So we have this footage and we want to track it and also integrate everything back into Blender. And by the way, before we start, I just wanted to show you some of the power of SynthEyes, and this is why I use it. You may be wondering, I'm a big advocate of Blender's tracker. Whoops. Why do I use SynthEyes? It's because of this. This is markerless. It was shot on this laptop webcam. That's just garbage. Yeah, so this is why we should do it. Okay, so here's what we do. Basically, we want to take this footage and we want to convert it into an image sequence, and we're going to use Blender to do that. We're then going to send it into SynthEyes, do our tracking, and then send it back into Blender. So that's the workflow. How do we do it? So starting off with the image sequence, we're going to open the newest version of Blender. And by the way, to convert into an image sequence, you can use FFmpeg or After Effects or whatever you want, but I like Blender. We're going to put this on full screen and then just open up the video editing workspace, because this is where we do our video editing, and then import in a movie. And let's just find this. I called it footage. There we go. And again, what we're doing here is we're changing this from an MP4 file to just a list of PNGs, for example, because that is better for tracking, and I don't think SynthEyes actually accepts video, but I could be wrong there. So one of the main things you need to make sure you do here is that you're going to notice the color is a bit weird. At least I notice it because I know what this bathroom's supposed to look like. Make sure you go to the Render tab, Color Management, and change this from Filmic over to Standard, so we don't actually change what this looks like in terms of color, which could actually affect our tracking. And we also want the original color. And now we can also choose where we want to trim this footage. So usually the first couple frames, I'm just going to let it, buffer here. Usually the first couple frames, it takes me a second to gear up. So maybe around here we'll start. So frame 21, just copy that over as our start. You can see, there we go. And then it doesn't have to be incredibly long. We're just going to be doing some auto tracking anyways. But let's say we end there, for example. So let's say 202. So basically we've taken footage, color management stuff, and then trimmed it, and now we just want to export this. So Output tab, I'm going to choose a PNG sequence. This is actually kind of important. You may think you want a JPEG sequence. Basically, you want to minimize the artifacts you're going to get, because you want all the detail that was originally there for the tracking. So pick something with no compression issues, really. So PNG, EXR, whatever. So we're going to bring down the compression, and then desktop folder. I'm just creating a new directory. We can call this recently graduated, because that is the case. And I will not stop talking about it because I'm excited. And this is actually the first tutorial I filmed post that. We can call this graduation and then a little underscore. So it's going to give us a bunch of indexes, as you can see. So we're going to click accept, Control F12 to render. Okay, there we go. As that is churning along, I'm going to, because I'm doing this all live, let's actually see, where's this folder I created? Called it recently graduated. This should be in alphabetical order. Here we go. You can see this is populating a image sequence with graduation underscore the frame number, and it starts at frame 21 because that's where we trimmed it, and it's going to end at like 202. So it's almost done. It's just doing some very, very easy rendering. Okay, so there we go. And at this point, we're done with Blender for this footage step, and now we want to hop over to SynthEyes. Okay, there we go. We have SynthEyes open. I'm running version 1905, I guess. It's kind of irrelevant. We're going to go to File, New, and this is where we load in our shot. So I'm just going to go to the desktop and navigate over to our shot. And you can either select everything, or what I like to do is just select the first frame. It automatically detects it. So first frame, even though it's not frame 1, it's frame 21, that is still fine. So just select it, click open, and you're going to see a bunch of settings. First of all, recognize that it was 181 frames long, which makes sense. If you do 202 minus 21 is 181 frames. and it also detected a bunch of other stuff. But we just want to make sure our frame rate, which I think was around 30 frames per second, is matched, just for playback reasons. But you can also do some pre-processing, but we're just going to keep it simple. Click OK, let this buffer in. I don't want to get too complicated. This is just about basic workflow. So I want to go into detail, but not necessarily in detail about how to use SynthEyes. Okay, so we have our footage and we want to track it. And the reason we brought this into SynthEyes instead of just doing it in Blender is because of how fucking good this is at automatically tracking. So let's do that. We're going to enable fine tune just for that precision. Doesn't really matter. Let's do an auto track. So it does everything for us, and hopefully there shouldn't be any issues. There's a bit of reflection on the urinals. A lot of people peed on it. There we go. You can see we have a pixel error of 1.43-ish, which isn't too hot. You want to usually try to get under a pixel. I mean, I'm sure this has accurate motion, but we could probably do better. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our solve. Again, we're in the solve panel. We're going to switch over to refine because we're going to refine our solve. I didn't click that, did I? Refine. There we go. And we are also going to get rid of some of our problematic trackers. And we can either do that manually. Like, for example, I don't like this one that's on the border of the mirror because maybe there's some issues with the reflection. We can either delete them manually or go to track, clean up trackers, and we're going to automatically detect high error trackers. That is trackers with an error higher than 30. And if we bring this down to, 6, maybe I got that reversed. Basically, this is how many trackers qualify for what we're doing here. Now, I think that's right. So as we bring down this error, like let's say 3, there are 32 trackers that have an error higher than 3, and that's only going to get bigger. But let's not get crazy here. Anything higher than 20 is just garbage. So select those, fix those, which is to get rid of them. And then let's do another solve. And now we are under a pixel, which I think is fine. We can also do another round of this. I'm not being super specific here. Let's go under 10 maybe. Fix those. Refine. Okay, 0.93. Let's say that it's a good solve. And we just want to make sure that we like our orientation as well. Our coordinate system. So I'm just going to go to the 3D panel. I like to go to, I guess, just perspective L or click lock, whichever one you want. And it automatically picked a decent ground plane. I don't know if I could have done a better job myself. If you want to do something different, you can just lasso. You can lasso some trackers, right click, grid, 2 facets, verts, and trackers. That's saying put the grid to what is selected, essentially. And you see that it's fine, except this spinning, the rotation is all wrong. So we can either undo, or let me just show you how to fix that. I'm getting way in the weeds here, but let me show you how to fix this. We're just going to rotate our world, or not, don't click that, 1 second. Make sure to go into quad perspective so we can see what we're doing. And you can see that right now when we rotate, it's only rotating the camera, whereas we want to rotate everything all together, including the trackers. So just click whole, not world, but click whole. And now you can see this is all rotating together. So I'm just going to rotate this until the bottom right quadrant is looking like it's correctly oriented, or at least in a nice way. There we go. And now when we go back to our perspective, you can see that this is looking pretty good. Of course, it's not the greatest track in the world, but we didn't try. Okay, so let's say we're happy with that. You want to export this back over to Blender, and just to show how much power we have here, we're also just going to add some extra stuff. Like, let's just say we want to add a little earthling right there. Right, so we want to export our track, the camera, this 3D model, everything. How do we do that? You can either go to File, Export, and among this list of a million options, you can pick Blender Python version, which works, but kind of gives different results depending on what version of Blender you're using. So I don't recommend that. What I like to do is I like to use Alembic 1.5+. So you can use Blender, but this is what I recommend. Alembic. And just choose a destination, a graduated track. There we go. And right now this is all on default settings. I can just click default and nothing will change. Technically, there is one thing we should change in here, and that is our starting frame, but I'm not going to do that here, just to show that we can do it in Blender as a last resort. So just keep it on default, click OK, and it has exported. So now it's close SynthEyes, don't need to save, because I am fairly confident everything's been going well so far. And then back in Blender, we are going to delete this. Back in the layout panel, we are going to, I guess, delete everything, and then import Alembic, or you can just go to File, Import Alembic. That's more clicks, but whatever. And then just select this graduated track. There we go. And you can see that we get a whole bunch of stuff. And this is because we kept it on default settings. We didn't say don't export the mesh. We didn't say don't export the camera, anything like that. Basically, what we have here is these are our trackers, these little pyramids. This is the mesh, and we have this very, very tiny camera, which we can make bigger in the sense of the viewport, just like this visual we have here. Just go to the camera tab, viewport display, bring up the size. This doesn't change anything about the camera, just visually what we see, what we can click. When we go to the camera tab, you can see that if you remember the shot, this is pretty much the motion. But just to make sure, we're going to go to background images. Again, camera tab, background images, add image, and I don't think, yeah, this shouldn't be loaded yet unless you selected in your Alembic file to bring in the sequence, which I don't know if is an option. So either way, just go to open, go to your sequence, select everything or just the first frame and have it detect sequences and open that up. Okay, there we go. And now you see when we play this, there's going to be a big issue, but let's play it. You see it's kind of working, but there's a bit of a wobble or drifting. So it looks like it's maybe a frame or two off. So how do we actually deal with that? You know, going from fast tutorials to this drinking water in the middle of a tutorial thing. What a power play. Okay, so how do we fix this? Well, I said we could fix that by just changing the export settings in SynthEyes when we did the Alembic export. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do that in Blender. So camera selected, which we have, go to, I think it is not physics, it is constraints. And you can see we have this transform cache, which comes with our Alembic file and lets us control a bunch of stuff. But what we care about is this frame offset, right? So if we make the frame offset like 10, you're going to see that something happens, but now the problem has gotten worse. So the question is, what do we need to offset it by? And I'll tell you, it's either plus or minus a frame. I'm pretty sure it's plus a frame. So I've set it to 1, and now you see everything's tracking perfectly. So basically everything was 1 frame off, and the reason for that is that SynthEyes indexed the first frame as the 0th frame. So on 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of starting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it started at 0, that's why it's a frame off. And you see if we go to the first frame, which is frame 0, we don't actually have a background, so that kind of describes the issue. So we are just going to trim this so it starts on the first frame, frame number 1. And now you see when we are on frame number 1 in our timeline, right, first frame, everything is working perfectly. So on the first frame, everything's aligned, we have our background, and we can play that out. Perfect. And at this point, you can do absolutely whatever you want. You have it in Blender. You can duplicate your Earthlings like I did in that CG Matter video, and they will track on as well as your solve was, you know. In this case, not too well, because it was about a pixel of error. But, you know, what can you do?